Accessibility Research Association. Technological advances are accelerating the arrival of the intelligent world. While we benefit from the convenience brought by technology, we must also realize that organizations and individuals in less digitalized regions are struggling with the digital divide. Today, we'll talk about the universal benefits technology brings, share best practices in information accessibility, education, and nature conservation, and look at how we can convey human touch through technology. Today, we are very glad to have Anthony, the head of technology at Rainforest Connection, here to share with us how the Forest Guardian project has used cloud and AI to help forest rangers and biologists protect the land, the plants, and the animals we love.
Hi, I'm Anthony Harfield. Today I'm going to be sharing the work that Huawei and Rainforest Connection have been doing to protect the rainforest using cloud AI and with the support of the TECH4ALL program. First, a little bit about Rainforest Connection. We're building solutions using hardware and software for sensing in the forest, primarily using audio, listening to the sounds of the forest to detect illegal activities such as logging, but also to monitor biodiversity. A lot of the work that Rainforest Connection and TECH4ALL have been working towards is with people on the ground, typically rangers or locals, who we can empower to take action using technology. While many of the areas we are protecting are remote, high up in the tree canopy it's often possible to get a cell signal and make use of connectivity. With this connectivity to the cloud, we can use these sensors to stream audio data and make predictions about what's going on in the ground. And this is how the solution works. The sensors are listening to sounds in the forest 24/7, and the audio is streamed up to the cloud, where AI is used to determine what's going on at that location. And if something's bad is happening, then alert an ranger for them to take action. The rangers make use of this mobile application that sends alerts whenever something bad happens, and they can review the audio, listening to the audio and confirming whether it's a chainsaw, a vehicle, or a gunshot event. The sensor that we use is called a Guardian, and it sits high up in the tree. It actually started off as an old Huawei phone that we put in a box, but right now we're using specialized hardware that's designed to withstand all weather and temperatures and work up there high in the trees. So we put it high in the trees for two main reasons. One is to get the best cell signal, but the second is so that we can harness the power of the sun to charge the Guardian's batteries as much as possible so that they can work through the night. And at the bottom of the Guardian is a microphone that's recording all of the sounds for many kilometers around, and then it's using the cell signal to stream that to the cloud for processing. One of the advantages of sensing sound is that a single Guardian can monitor a wide area, a lot more than a camera could. And the impact of one device, therefore, is quite significant in terms of reducing carbon dioxide emissions. So despite the COVID restrictions, we installed Guardians in 5 new countries last year in partnership with Huawei's TECH4ALL program. The red pins on this map are all live streaming Guardian installations. Our largest is in Indonesia, in West Sumatra, where we currently have more than 20 Guardians streaming audio 24 hours a day. The green pins are places where we're doing biodiversity studies. I'm going to say a bit more about that in a minute. So Rainforest Connection performs prediction on Huawei Cloud Platform within Model Arts. It's had a lot of success with stopping chainsaws, vehicles, and other threats in the project shown on the previous slide. But this year we want to scale up and take on a much bigger challenge, and that's the challenge of monitoring biodiversity so that we can take action on conservation projects. So to go beyond threat detection and have a significant impact on protecting biodiversity, we need to scale up our ability to monitor the existence of insects, birds, frogs, and larger animals in our forests, really at the level of individual species. So our goal is to create the world's largest ongoing collaborative species accounting project that can aggregate acoustic data from live and offline sources. Unlike chainsaws, where the sound is similar across the world, with species we need to train a lot more models for particular regions. So each model in a region will support a different set of species local to that area. And so this is a big data science effort to do that. So this is our goal really, is to, as well as to be able to support a lot more different sensors on ingesting audio onto the Model Arts platform, we also want to make use of Model Arts' ability to automatically train models so that we don't need data scientists to train every single model in every single region, but that we can make use of Model Arts to do some of that. And then that will lead to not just alerts, but also actionable insights that scientists can use to make a difference. All this is going to be possible through the great tools that Huawei Cloud has to offer. I'm going to focus on Model Arts, and specifically one part of Model Arts. But in general, Model Arts supports 3 use cases from the tools that expert data scientists use to create their own custom models, and that we've also been using to create custom chainsaw and vehicle models. But it also supports automated model creation, and that's what I'd like to show you today. So EXML is Model Arts' system that automates the data scientist's job, training, tuning, deploying a model. And it currently supports 5 domains, one of which is sound classification. So I'm going to walk you through a small case study in how a scientist might use this platform to train their own model. And the scientist's journey starts with all the audio data that they've collected from many different sensors, including the Rainforest Guardians. In this case, the scientists identified 82 species of birds in audio from a guardian in the Amazon. As a scientist, I would upload all of my examples to the Object Storage Service OBS. And here inside the bucket is a folder for each individual species. So we can see here species for dusky-tailed flatbill, piratic flycatcher, or screaming piha. And inside each one of these folders is many wave files. Each one is a bird call from that particular species. Once we have all our audio ingested, we can create a new sound classification project on the Model Arts platform. We're going to be importing all of the data that we uploaded into this data set. So we're going to create a new data set here. As well as selecting the audio that we're going to use, we also need to select a directory to output the model metadata and also the labels that we're going to produce. So we've created our project, and now we're going to be importing all of the data into that data set. So currently it doesn't have any examples in. Let's go ahead and import all of those examples that we uploaded. It needs to be in a specific structure, as I already showed in OBS, so that it knows which label to apply to each wave file. Now this import process takes a little bit of time, so you're going to want to come back in 5 minutes. And when you do that, you should see that your data set is completed. All of the sound files are labeled in here. So there's 82 different classes in here. And if we go through and inspect each individual file, we can listen to the audio files here. You could also make use of Model Arts to change which of these classes that you want to include in your training. So in some cases we might remove some of the classes if they don't have enough examples. Next, we're going to train the model. So This is very simple. We just hit the train button and select how much time we want to spend training. In this case, I've just selected 60 minutes. So when you've hit that button, now's a good time to go make a cup of tea, come back in a little while, and see how your training is going. So in this case, I came back after just 30 minutes and it was already complete, and you can see the accuracy of the model here is 89%. It also lists the accuracy of each individual class. So you can see, like, if you've got more examples for some classes, you're probably going to get a higher accuracy for those classes. This model that you've trained is the same as any other model on the Model Arts platform. So you can go in and inspect the parameters for the model and make use of it anywhere else on the platform. But what we're going to do is we're going to deploy it immediately. So we hit the deploy button on the model, and this is going to spin up a serving instance of the model, which is actually an HTTP server that will run. So with that HTTP server spun up, we can actually select an audio file and send a request to the service to get the response back. And look here, now we've got a JSON blob back, which shows that our screaming PR is in this example that we've chosen. So the next thing that you want to do is you want to hook this up to another application to make use of these AI predictions. And for developers, this is involve writing some code to call the API. But in our case, we can hook it up to one of our applications that we call the Explorer, which here we're showing audio that's been collected from another Guardian in the last few weeks, and we've passed all of that audio to the Model Arts service and we got predictions back, which we're showing on the spectrogram here. Each one of these boxes corresponds to a species, and as you can see in this stream, there's more than 10 different species being detected using that model. So this tool allows you to explore a single site of audio. But in the scientist case, what they would be wanting to do is running this across many different sites and aggregating the results to understand the population and the behavior of the species in that area. So how does this compare to having a data scientist who can train the model for you? So obviously, don't fire your data scientist yet. Like there's a lot of value in having a data scientist to be able to really tune the model to get the highest percentage. But the auto-trained models make a respectable performance as well. So if we look at the model that we just trained, if we only take the top 20 species from that model, then we've achieved 0.7% on the mean average precision for the EXEE model that we auto-trained, and that's quite respectable, we think. So just to summarize, what we're going to be focusing on this year in collaboration with Huawei and TECH4ALL is to really automate a lot of the training process so that we can scale up our biodiversity monitoring. And I'm going to finish with a video from one of our projects in Palawan, Philippines, so that you can see some of the impacts of our work.
Hi, I'm Huiyun from Rainforest Connection. We're about 30 meters up in a tree on the island of Palawan here in the Philippines. We're installing these Rainforest Connection Guardians, these listening devices, up in these treetops where they can't be seen, but they can hear everything in the forest all the time.
Palawan, we're saying that this is the last frontier in terms of forest resources. 70% of the land area of Palawan is covered with forest. And one of the threats really is still not only natural causes but also human factors. These are the illegal encroachment, illegal cutting, illegal logging.
We take old Huawei phones, we put them in here, they listen to all the sounds, they stream that up to the cloud, the Huawei cloud, where we're able to use AI to pick out the sounds of chainsaws, logging trucks, gunshots, motorcycles, anything that indicates a threat. And then we can send a live real-time alert to local partners here, partners that Huawei and Smart have built. Smart, the telecom system here in the Philippines, built a great partnership with DE&R. So they can actually respond to these chainsaw alerts in real time and stop them.
Ito na rin ang magre-report sa amin kung nasan yung illegalista.
Ito ang problema namin ngayon sa Palawan. Marami ang napuputol ng mga kahoy gubat. Kahit na anong teknolohiya o strategiya na maaari namin gamitin para sa pagpapatupad ng aming tungkulin, ay malugod namin na tatanggapin.
Yung activities ng DNR dito sa amin, maganda yung activities nila. Nandun yung preservation natin ng kalikasan natin. So yung pagdating ng technology na ito, maganda yung magiging effect niya dito sa Taytay. Malaki ang itutulong nito dito sa conservation ng natural resources natin, especially dito sa Palawan.
Ang inyong pagdating po rito at dinala niyo po ang inyong teknolohiya dito sa bayan ng Taytay, mga taga-Huawei, na siya pong makakatulong sa pagpoproteksyon po ng aming kapaligiran para sa susunod pa pong mga henerasyon.
These projects is a need for the people of El Nido. El Nido is tourism destination, kaya malaking tulong ang device na ito na ilalagay dito.
Proteksyon po natin yung ating kagubatan para marami pa po mga tourists na darating dito at makita nila na napakaganda ng Palawan.
When you hear of Palawan, pupunta ka dito because of the destination, and one of the reason is the good environment. Pag hindi natin inagaan yung ating environment, lahat tayo magsasuffer.
So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share our work to protect the rainforest using cloud AI on the Huawei cloud platform. I'm looking forward to come back and share our results from this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony, for that wonderful speech and for showing us how ICT is being used to protect and maintain healthy ecosystems. Next, Emotech's co-founder Chelsea Chen will share with us a multimodal AI teaching assistant solution that uses the power of AI to teach spoken English and give us a glimpse of real interactive teaching scenarios.
Chen, a Chinese now living in London. I'm the co-founder of a London startup called Emotech. The specialty of Emotech, as our name, emotion technology, we try to bring emotion, more human approach to the technology, make the technology to be more like a friend, more like a partner, but not just a code technology. So the specialty of our technology is we call multimodality AI. So it's the upgraded AI technological solution. It combines speech and language, computer vision, and spatial AI all together. So today, my short introduction is more about how AI will empower us the future of education. In my understanding, AI will not replace any real human teachers, but become a very reliable and helpful assistant for the teachers. So what is education to me? I think education is a relationship between educator and also learners. It's not just about children. It's not just something happened in the campus. It's beyond that. In your lifetime, you always will learn something and you will teach something to somebody else. So that is a long-term process. And how we can bring AI to this long-time project, lifetime project. AI, when we talk about AI, most of the people, the top mind is, oh, it's a robot, or it's something about computer science, it's algorithm. But actually, AI, it's a very broad concept. It combines computer vision for sure, computer science, and also anthropology, language, psychology, many diverse relevant knowledge all together. So before I give you more broad or even broad concept, maybe we can go into a video. We recently collaborate with Huawei, the first AI teaching assistant. Show the video.
Emotech is launching the world's first multimodal AI teaching assistant solution, bringing English lessons into a new era. Our solution has audio-visual technologies which can overcome the low recognition rate in noisy environments, thus highly improving the accuracy and stability of the evaluation results for every student. It overcomes challenges that audio-only systems have, providing consistent and reliable assessment results. The video content generation has text-to-video technology that can easily convert any written language into animations of virtual teachers.
Traveling by ferry. Thank you.
The audio-visual guidance from the virtual teacher allows students to locate their errors and highlight their improvement suggestions, building natural communication. We believe our multimodal approaches will assist teachers, students, educational companies and institutions more efficiently, and we hope our solutions can bring improvements to the quality of teaching, promoting equal access to education.
Okay, as you can see, we try to bring a very new technology into the education, especially in the English education. We generate a special multimodal assessment process. So this AI teaching assistant can not only help the real teachers to teach in the class, but can also provide more accurate assertion. And also of the clients, the student don't need to use the teacher's time, but can practice more with this AI solution. So based on that, I try to conclude 5 important things, how AI or why AI is important for the future education. So the first thing is about understand. As you know, when teacher needs to teach something, the teacher needs to know the level of the student. What AI can do is AI have more sensor, has more calculus, is more accurate, and even have more data to do the comparison. So the AI can maybe it's better than the real human teacher to understand the student's level. Because of the COVID-19, the education suddenly cannot happen in the classroom, but have to be like a home class or some other situation. So one student wants to know, how is my level when I cannot find any teacher around? So the AI can provide the better assessment by real time. There is no time difference. There is no teacher will have any excuse, just use this application to understand my level. And also the second thing is about efficiency. In China, for example, every classroom probably have 40 to 60 students. In London, probably 20 to 30. I'm not really know the situation in Africa, but I assume there will not be very small group. But there is only one teacher in the classroom. How the teacher can take care of each student? One teacher asks a question. When students want to answer the question, how teacher can know each one's answer? At this time, the AI, through computer vision, through microphone array, and also the algorithm, the teacher can get the feedback equally when each student try to answer the question together. In the online courses, you probably will face a few hundred different students altogether. So how, if without AI, how the teacher can cover every student? And also the third thing is about equality. Unfortunately, in the human world, there are still different bias all around. but the algorithm is fair. It will not tell anyone from your skin colors, your gender, which country you come from, but generally give very accurate accessories. At the same time, especially in the home class, sometimes we have to be in a quiet room, but not every country, not every family has that condition. The parents may need to have a business call around or something like that. But AI, with our multimodality solution, we not just record everything through the audio, we also track people's lip movements, then to provide the environmental isolation, noise isolation to get the best result. And also the fourth thing is about education personalization. We talk about personalized education thousands of times, but in world of AI, these things can be really disrupted. This time, not the courses can be based on students' level, but also students can also even choose your favorite animation teacher. You may prefer a male teacher, you may prefer a female younger teacher, or even animation caricature teacher to teach you English. So this time, based on our technology, we call TTV. The teachers, the real human teachers, only need to provide the text, and the algorithm will generate accurate different animation to provide the accurate English teaching. And also the last thing is about effectiveness. Learning, the most important result is about effectiveness. Whether the accuracy is increased, whether your freshness is increased, all these things based on the learning with AI before the class, during the class, and after the class. The students has more opportunity to practice, and also will be more confident to face the algorithm, face the animation more than the real human to improve the English. That's the fifth benefit of this AI English teaching assistant. So in the end, I would like to borrow the sentence I really love from Huawei, is leaving no one behind. I think the beauty of AI for the education is we try to use the advanced technology to help everyone in the world and leaving no one behind. That's mine.
Thanks, Chelsea, for sharing your story and showing us how AI is being used to help teachers, students, and education institutions to improve learning results. Information Accessibility Forum. In fact, the theme of the entire summit is digital inclusion. The conversation about digital inclusion often centers around ways to access information and use information. Similarly, information accessibility aims to allow everyone to access and use information equally, making it barrier-free and convenient. In China, there are 85 million people with disabilities and 256 million people over the age of 60. These groups are the key beneficiaries of information accessibility services. Information accessibility services aim to bridge the digital divide for these people, help them keep up with the digital age, and enable them to fully participate in society so that everyone can unlock and realize their personal value. I believe that everyone working in tech is obliged to dedicate themselves to this end. I'm very glad to be joined by 4 guests today who will discuss information accessibility from the perspective of tech workers. Next to me is Mr. Zhou Wenbing, founder of Shenzhen Huishi Zhilian Technology, associate professor and doctoral supervisor of Shenzhen University. Hello, everyone. Sitting next to Mr. Zhou is Mr. Zhang Jianzong, deputy general manager and technical director of Harbin E-Times Digital Technology. Next to him is Mr. Liu Biao, technical director of Shenzhen Information Accessibility Research Association. He's my colleague and a visually impaired engineer. Hello, everyone. And this is Mr. Zhou Jiangnan, CEO of Wuhan Wangming Accessible Technology. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. In a moment, they will be discussing why technical workers need to be concerned about information accessibility and learn about the needs of people with disabilities. They will also share their own practices. As mentioned earlier, a huge number of people in China have some kind of disability. And of course, there are also a lot of elderly people. In fact, many of us will encounter situational or temporary obstacles in our lives. What observations do you have about people with disabilities? Professor Zhou, let's start from you. First, when was the last time you saw a blind person? I don't think we see them that often. Why is that? The reason is things are too difficult for them. Although China has laid more tactile paving than any other country in the world, traveling is still very difficult for the blind. In addition, it is difficult for blind people in China to live on their own. And they often need the support of family members in order to live a better life. Even after 42 years of reform and opening up, the lives of the visually impaired have yet to be comprehensively improved. Okay, thank you for your observation, Professor Zhou. Now we know that traveling is especially difficult for the visually impaired. Mr. Zhou Jiangnan, what are your observations? I started studying information aiding software as a graduate student. Foreign countries are ahead of us in this regard, but the technology used is relatively basic. Let me give you a simple example. Both mobile phones and computers are controlled using our hands. But how can people with physical disabilities, like people with ALS or paralyzed people, including the elderly with hemiplegic paralysis, use their hands to control mobile phones and computers and take advantage of the internet? These are big challenges we face at present. In other countries, some costly and complicated hardware was developed to tackle these challenges. But in China, we don't even have that. Another example, in my view, information accessibility solutions are often deployed by young people and are designed for young people and from their own perspective. For example, in the shopping apps we use, you often see the original price of a product crossed out in gray. And then the sale price is in a bigger font size. This may seem easy for us young people, but elderly people may not be familiar with this visual language of font sizes and colors. They have a hard time telling how much a product is, because they don't understand the significance of the two prices on the screen. This can be difficult for elderly people who don't use smartphones very often. So I urge more young people to get involved in information accessibility in order to create a barrier-free information society. And when you get old, hopefully your children will be designing the next wave of products and doing so with accessibility in mind. Maybe some 30 or 40 years from now, when new electronic information products, technical solutions, AR, VR, and AI are widely used, we may find ourselves in the same situation as today's elderly people. So it's important to engage more young people in this field. Thank you for your very detailed observation, Mr. Zhou. You talked about the needs of elderly users. Indeed, we all will get old, but many of our products today are designed for young people. When we design products for the elderly, it is important to understand their needs. Likewise, the products designed for people with disabilities should have their needs considered. That is, the development of technology has brought a lot of convenience to all groups in the society. Of course, we're talking about the topic of information accessibility today, but actually, we also touched on the inconvenience brought by technology development. There is a digital divide. So as tech workers ourselves, we know that capabilities of many different technologies. How can we use technologies to help people with disabilities? What can we do for them? I'd also like to hear your ideas. Let's start from Professor Zhou. What kind of technology do you use and what have you done? Over the past 2 years, we help visually impaired people live and travel better. We have developed our Huiyun guide system. This system consists of 2 parts. One part is our Huiyun assistant app that can be installed on mobile phones. In addition to this app, we've also developed the Huiyun smart device. When a smart device is connected to a mobile phone using the USB port, we can use the sensors installed on the smart device. As Liu Biao said, we can actually hail a car online. But how about walking from home to outside? This is a big problem for visually impaired people. So the smart device and the Huiyun Assistant app can detect the current road environment and help visually impaired users plan a safe path. It helps them walk to the bus stop or find a taxi rank. This solves the problem of walking from home to the bus stop or taxi rank. To help visually impaired users get on the bus, we actually have done some work. The navigation software we commonly use is developed with sighted people in mind. It only gives some directional guidance. For example, let's say you need to walk to the bus stop. When you are about 20 meters from your destination, the navigation stops. Yes, the navigation is over, but it is these 20 last meters that makes visually impaired people still have difficulty in reach the bus stop. Now we can use visual analysis to identify the location of the bus stop. After the user arrives at the bus stop, getting onto the bus is the next problem. Therefore, we use AI and data analysis to help them identify bus stops and bus numbers so that everything goes smoothly. In addition to travel, we've also developed functions like object recognition, commodity recognition, text recognition, and the forum recognition to help visually impaired people live a better life. Thank you, Professor Zhou. So our products use AI technologies to help visually impaired people, giving them more convenience in travel and various other scenarios in life. Perhaps Liu Biao can try out these products sometime. Okay. Besides the products mentioned by Professor Zhou, I'd also like to hear from the other guests. Mr. Zhang Jianzong from Harbin E-Times Digital Technology, can you tell us about the products your company has developed and which groups you aim to assist with those products? We've developed a product named Trouble-Free Hearing. It is for people with hearing impairments and it addresses 4 scenarios. The first is education and entertainment. Because short video apps and online teaching are very popular, this is one of our focuses. With real-time transcription technology and some Android APIs, videos can be transcribed into text, even when the audio is muted. This product is not only for people with hearing impairments, it can also be useful for people without any hearing difficulties. Especially for public occasions, it's very useful. The second function, as I was alluding to earlier, aims to enable free communication.
您好，我听力不好，
It
请对
helps
着手
solve the
机说
problems
话，
of
手机会
temporary
将您的声
social
音转换成
exchanges.
文字。
The scenario we have in mind is an exchange between 2 people who don't know each other. So what does the user need to do? He needs to tell the other person that he has a hearing impairment and explain how they can communicate using our app. When the free communication module is enabled, it will use some text recognition and text-to-voice technologies
你好，请问火车站怎么
to
走
let the other person know that I have a hearing impairment, and you can talk into my phone, and my phone can convert what you say in text,
谢谢
and we can communicate that way. This is how the product can help solve temporary communication obstacles. By temporary, I mean scenarios in which two people may have a simple exchange and never see each other again. It can also save records. This is very helpful, especially when asking for directions or consulting someone about something else. After you save a record, you can open it again at any time. The third function is meetings. This function is also enabled by transcription technology. It can help a hearing impaired person attend meetings just like anyone else. Many people with hearing impairments work in office environments, but meetings and other communication sessions at work can pose a challenge. If they can't hear and thus can't communicate effectively, they are at risk of being marginalized. With this meeting function, the user will be better able to follow discussion in a meeting. There are two features that really enhance the meeting function. One is online error correction. In the process of transcription, it can correct some mistakes in the transcribed text. The other feature is saving. The content of the meeting can be saved and shared in text or voice. People who haven't attended the meeting can use the record to develop meeting minutes. The last function is remote sign language interpretation. It can call a professional sign language interpreter anytime, anywhere, to help users solve communication problems that only a professional sign language interpreter can solve. These are the four functions of this product. Good. Thank you, Mr. Zhang. I've learned that Wang Ming has done a lot of work for people with disabilities. You've designed technical aids or accessibility products. I want to hear from Jiangnan about the logic or ideas behind the design of these products. I want to say a few words following what Mr. Zhang has said about things they've done for deaf or dumb people. I found that Huawei has launched a Harmony OS or HMS. Most programmers know Google's GMS, but actually Huawei's HMS, although it came out later, has more functional modules and more advanced technical architecture. HMS also provides a voice recognition function. So for example, it can recognize a baby crying. This function can be particularly useful for the hearing impaired, as it can recognize the sound of a kettle or the doorbell. The reprogrammers know that many people don't need these kinds of functions, but some people do. People with a hearing impairment can listen, quote unquote, to an app or a watch that has this AI module from HMS. When they go out, the app or their watch can recognize car horns. Even if they can't hear it, they can be notified by a vibration from their watch or phone. They can know when their baby is crying. They can gather all this information without hearing. Or maybe they can set their phone or watch to vibrate when the kettle starts boiling. AI can help the hearing impaired live much more easily. As Mr. Zhang said, this is an area that works well with Huawei's technologies, because HMS provides many online and offline AI modules, including AI text recognition and voice synthesis. Many of these modules can be used offline, and so are in even higher demand. I started to learn about assistive tools from other countries as a postgraduate student. Like I said, the tools from that generation were developed in the 90s and worked through PCs. Today, they are very outdated, very expensive, and don't support Chinese. Programmers like me identify opportunities here. Now that we've entered the era of mobile internet and AI, we can develop a new generation of domestic products to replace those old ones. If those products were version 1.0, we can now develop domestic version 3.0 and then export them. Our products can help users both in China and abroad. We've developed many functions based on AI modules provided by HMS. We've developed a range of products called Qiming for people who are visually impaired. We are a startup aiming to help the visually impaired use smartphones more easily and efficiently, just like everyone else. Of course, this would be impossible without AI. The visually impaired often struggle with phone cameras, but with the help of AI modules, like those provided by Huawei's HMS, Kirin chips, AI interfaces, and offline AI-powered text recognition technologies, they can download the Qiming camera directly to their phones. The app can take photos to help them understand their surroundings because it reads descriptions out loud. It can act as their eyes to help explore the world. With this AI-enabled app, the visually impaired no longer need to call up their friends for help. I found many people with visual impairments are of high self-esteem and capable, and the technology can act as their eyes. We've also innovated our interaction mode with devices. Older generations of assistive devices adopted a conventional interaction mode. It's very outdated. Now we have developed a new way to interact with devices. Voice assistants available in the market can only be used to open an app. If you want to use a certain function in the app, like the scan function in WeChat, you have to go through multiple steps. People like you and me need to take 7 or 8 steps. Click the plus sign and at the upper right corner, select the scan function and so on. Visually impaired people might need to take 10 to 20 steps to get the same result. If they are not familiar with the app, it may even take them 30 steps or more, since it requires them to touch and double-click the screen often. Now with the voice assistant and other assistive technologies available, we can open scan, moments, or other functions with just one click, accessing all functions with the app. This is a screen reader that can read all content on the screen. Of course, it relies on a voice assistant to work, but visually impaired people can use the phone faster with its help. That's the power of technology. Does this help others as well? Of course. You can use it too when your hands aren't free, like if you are driving. For example, Professor Zhou, if your child sends you a voice message, could you click that message while you're driving? You can't click it even if you want to know what that message says, but you can use assistive technologies like the voice assistant to play the message for you. You can use your voice to control apps in your phone. This technology can not only help visually impaired people but also other people when their vision is restricted. If you are driving, you have to focus on the road and not your phone. But being able to use the power of speech, we can control the phone with our voices. In addition to the voice assistant, we've also developed a dial plate to help users interact with devices. Let me show you how it works. I've opened the screen reader. It can read anything on the screen, and the icons are big, which is especially useful for older users. You don't need to look at the screen. You can click anywhere on the screen to know what it is. By clicking here, you can open the Qiming radio to listen to programs. Some programmers may think developing apps for people with disabilities requires a lot of investment. But we can build these apps with Huawei and on other ecosystems. Our Qiming radio used to have Qiming Ting and a playlist for the blind. These were programs for blind people, but we later found they didn't meet the universal design and the reasonable accommodation requirements in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So we started to work with the Himalaya and imported their audio programs. This helps visually impaired people listen to programs on art, films, and massage training tutorials. You can also more easily enjoy novels and live news and many other things on Himalaya, which I can show you now. People with visual impairments typically need content on their phones to be read out loud. Then they double-click to access content. With all of this reading out loud, visually impaired people can learn so much more. In the dial plate mode, they can click anywhere on the screen to activate the screen reading. By just releasing their fingers, their phone will move on to the next song on the playlist. The screen reader can read every move out loud to inform users of what's happening. Helping visually impaired people use phones is not our only goal. We do more than that. Let me explain a bit. First thing you have to know is that it's easy to develop apps for the visually impaired. If you go into the development tools, there is an exclamation mark that shows which icons don't support accessibility. You can use these development tools, such as the Android Studio, to analyze your code and to list the lines of code without accessibility tags. So you can easily change them or add an attribute. So the visually impaired can use your app and you will get more users. There are 17.5 million visually impaired people in China, so doing this could increase your user base by several hundred thousand. It's worth it to add a few lines of code for so many new users. Let's talk about shopping. Why? Because we did more than just adding accessibility tags here. Our tag worked like this. This is the Qiming Tong app. You can see a number of albums here, 214. Visually impaired people may not know what this number means. The screen reader reads it like this. There are 214 albums. This is very accurate, and it describes the content in a verbal way. Kendo Podcast, a program created by a blind person, has been played 953 times. Some older people may not understand what 955 and a 22 mean on their screens because they are displayed with only icons. Younger people may know this icon means the number of albums, and this one that looks like a play button means the number of times the album has been played, but we only know this because we use apps like this a lot. For the visually impaired and the elderly, just hearing or seeing the numbers doesn't mean much. So the content is read out in an explicit way, with clear subjects, verbs, and objects. This ensures the content makes more sense to everyone. So this is further information accessibility improvement that makes things clearer. Reading those tags is very useful. But our products, including the screen reader, make things a lot easier for people to understand. That's what I wanted to share with you. We have also developed some products for people with more restrictive physical disabilities and people with autism. If you're interested in this, don't hesitate to contact us. We are rolling out new products jointly developed with colleagues colleges from the Huazhong University of Science and Technology, so that they can serve the visually impaired and the elderly in both China and abroad. We're committed to creating the new generation of assistive technology for information accessibility. Mr. Zhou, thank you for sharing with us. I just want to highlight two very interesting takeaways from Mr. Zhou. First, that information accessibility products can help many more than just their target audience of people with disabilities. You spoke a lot about serving the elderly, right? People may wonder why the elderly are a key target group of information accessibility. This is because elderly people's physical functions and their cognitive abilities are often getting weaker. They can face a number of impairments. Compared to people with visual impairments, elderly people are still able to see and hear, but probably not very clearly. They can also be slow to perform actions. So when considering accessibility features for intelligent products, we should not only consider the needs of people with certain impairments, but also the needs of the elderly, and perhaps even inconveniences in many people's daily lives. This is the only way the products can truly achieve the goal of information accessibility. Jiangnan just mentioned his work on information accessibility. When programmers write product code by adding a line of code, they can greatly improve the product's accessibility experience. However, I think this is a process from 0 to 1. How can we go from 1 to 100 to constantly improve the experience? Maybe we need more innovations related to interaction. Of course, these innovations must be based on users' real needs, no matter whether you are a programmer or a designer. You cannot work based on visionary ideas. You must rely on real user needs. We can stand on the shoulders of giants, improving based on our current technical capabilities. For example, Jiangnan just talked about their cooperation with Himalaya FM and Huawei. I have a number of friends with impairments, so I know what we talked earlier is true, that in regards to the use of products and technologies, most people's needs are very similar. So for products that are used nationwide, such as Huawei smartphones, as well as popular apps such as WeChat and Taobao, how can we make them more accessible? I think this may be a topic that you are more interested in, because I expect that the majority of our audience today may not usually work on products for people with impairments. And may not have considered the issue of accessibility before. So how can we optimize existing products to make them more accessible? I think many people are interested in this topic. So Liu Biao, could you talk about what you have done in your work and how you are promoting relevant work? We mainly focus on optimizing software products, such as WeChat, Mobile Taobao, and Huawei's EMUI, to make them more accessible. Users with different types of impairments use different assistive devices. For example, visually impaired users may use screen reading software, and users with movement impairments may use external assistive devices or eye control that allows them to control electronic devices with their eyes. These assistive devices actually all rely on the same assistive technologies, including some accessibility interfaces defined at the operating system level, some coding specifications, and some standards. This is a basic capability at the level of technology implementation. This means that by complying with these standard technologies, product accessibility will be achieved. From the perspective of product design, we all know that development is just a phase of R&D, and accessibility should be considered throughout the entire product process, from requirement analysis, design to UI, R&D tests, and user feedback. We must also technologically adapt products to the basic assistive technologies mentioned earlier. This will allow users with impairments to use various assistive devices effectively. For example, visually impaired users will be able to use screen readers to read app content, while eye control tools can effectively control operation interfaces. In addition, the emergence of new AI technologies have facilitated new capabilities and enhanced product experiences. Traditional assistive technologies mentioned earlier cannot solve problems in some scenarios. For example, many e-commerce platforms currently use pictures to present detailed information. Likewise, in social scenarios, when people see interesting content on Weibo or WeChat Moments, they often take a screenshot and forward it. After such a picture is shared, how can we identify text in the picture? Traditional technologies struggle to deal with this problem. However, AI technologies such as OCR and AI-assisted image recognition capabilities can describe the picture, helping visually impaired people better understand the content. Take Huawei's AI Lens as an example. It describes what an item is for you. Just like the Android version of QQ Space, AI Lens can describe pictures posted on social platforms. For example, it can tell you that a picture is a selfie of a girl in a white dress taken at sunset. We just mentioned that e-commerce platforms display information in pictures, and this function can help visually impaired people understand such information. Well, Liu Biao, as the Technical Director of Shenzhen Information Accessibility Research Association and as a visually impaired person, I wonder if you could answer this question. After hearing about so many accessible technologies and products shared by our guests, do you feel that these technologies and products are sufficient, or do you think that existing technologies and products still need to become more accessible in some ways? Could you give us some examples? Well, I think there's a great diversity of products. One type of products are intended to fulfill the needs of everyone, which was mentioned earlier. For example, if you use WeChat, I want to use it as well. If you use Weibo, I may need it as well. What I mean is that this need is not just an abstract social attribute, since there is a universal need for social interaction, right? So if you use WeChat, I can't use another product, let alone develop a separate product. Instead, when you use WeChat, I want to use it as well. We all use WeChat in the same environment to experience its functions and value. Of course, in order to meet the needs of some users, it is also necessary to develop specific products, such as vision aids we mentioned earlier, right? For example, sensors, which are, of course, not only for the visually impaired. They could also be used by the elderly, for example. In essence, technologies should be general purpose, such as those for fall prevention and obstacle detection. That is to say, such products are generic, as they can be used by everyone. Another type of products are those developed for a particular purpose. What I mean is products that meet users' special needs. Such needs can be quite special and may be particularly important for certain types of people. Therefore, we must develop products for those specific needs. Common needs, however, are the reasons that we all use the same products, which is essential in achieving a truly accessible experience. Liu Biao, you mentioned common needs, and I believe that in most of our daily lives, 95% or more of the products we use are for common needs. So in terms of products that are based on common needs, perhaps you could give some advice to our engineers in order to help them develop accessible products that are based on common needs. To improve understanding, could you give us a demo? Okay, let me give you a demo on the difference between an accessible product and an inaccessible product. Then I will show you how to modify code so that your product can stand out by resolving the accessibility issue. Let's first look at an inaccessible app. Dictation of the functions of these buttons is not available. Now let's take a look at an optimized app where the functions of these buttons can be dictated by the screen reading software. This is a demo of a registration form. By adding some attributes that increase accessibility, the registration button becomes the focus. Currently, we see that there is no way to locate the registration button. Let's take a closer look at this. Now we will add a few attributes so that the registration button of this web page becomes a focus and can be easily operated. First, let's make sure the registration button is focused when the tab key is used, and that the use of an external keyboard is supported. Then we must make sure the button is operable through the keyboard, such as when clicking the spacebar or return key. Now, we can click the registration button. Now we can click the registration button, then we will add an attribute, row button, so that the screen reading software knows that this is a button. Finally, we will add a label attribute so that screen reading software can dictate the registration function. Now let's see how it works. After adding a few attributes, we've set the focus to the registration button in this registration form. This presentations shows us how we modify code to improve information accessibility. Of course, as mentioned before, code optimization is only one step of the process, but it's very important. Thank you for your presentation. And I know that information accessibility is a hot topic now. Late last year, China's State Council and the MIIT unveiled a draft of policies for accessibility, including the new National Technical Standards for Information Accessibility. How do these policies and standards help you? They are very helpful indeed. Due to COVID-19, many technology products, including online products, have sprung up. These products are exactly what the country needs, but at the same time, they are difficult for the elderly and people with disabilities to use. To address this problem, the State Council announced some aging-friendly policies last year and called on special actions for the elderly. The MIIT took special actions for aging-friendly transformation and accessibility improvement, and will continue to do so in 2021. These special actions involve over 100 enterprises and public institutions that will benefit many more enterprises. With the help of enterprises and technical engineers, information accessibility will get better and go further. Liu Biao, I know you have participated in the accessibility improvement of many internet products. What changes did these new policies bring to your partners? Following the release of this policy, more people have become aware of aging-friendly transformation and accessibility improvement. More internet companies showed interest and started working on this, including some companies with no prior knowledge. This trend indicates efforts to improve information accessibility started late in China. Many people are still unfamiliar with the concept today, but it has been great to see big progress in recent years. Information accessibility proposals were raised several times at China's 2 sessions. The national standards were released and implemented last year. The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology also issued special action plans. These efforts have been essential in driving the information accessibility industry forward. As I just mentioned, Chinese society is still unfamiliar with information accessibility, but this is a systemic project that covers many areas, such as education, economic fundamentals, policies, laws and regulations, and industry. Extreme poverty has been eliminated in China. The next step is improving living standards. So topics such as aging-friendly transformation has been put forward for discussion to improve accessibility for certain groups. Demands for accessible products are enormous. Let's consider several questions. How often do you order takeout? How often do you shop on JD.com or Taobao? I order takeout at least twice a day, and sometimes as often as 4 times a day. I'm also a JD Plus member. People with disabilities have the same needs as everyone else, and they have high demands for accessible products. Most people have a wide range of options when selecting products, but people with disabilities are often limited to accessible products. In China, there are around 85 million people with disabilities, meaning there is a huge demand for accessible products. This represents an enormous market. Just now, the other guests shared some difficulties facing technology, talent, and the industry. Professor Zhou, you are a university professor and a doctoral supervisor. Could you share some of your opinions on information accessibility from the perspective of a scientific research? Or have you encountered any difficulties? First, I would like to talk about how I got into the information accessibility domain. Before 2018, I mainly focused on autonomous driving. But in 2018, I became friends with someone who was visually impaired. This was when I gradually started to realize how difficult travel is for visually impaired people. Navigation systems designed for visually impaired people share some similarities with autonomous driving systems. So I want to use autonomous driving technology to help the visually impaired with travel. But there are many difficulties. For example, autonomous vehicles have many sensors, which are even more expensive than the vehicles. In addition, roads are very standardized with traffic signs, but the paths we walk can be very irregular. When walking, we also need to walk up and down steps and pay attention to pedestrian crossings. The hardware used in vehicles is expensive, but this is acceptable as vehicles are mass-produced. However, the cost of navigation products for visually impaired people cannot be too high, so we can only use consumer-grade sensors. Roads for vehicles are hugely different from paths for pedestrians. Although autonomous driving technology can be used to assist the travel of visually impaired people, doing so effectively is very difficult. In addition to technical issues, social collaboration is also required. For example, when visually impaired people go out, they will often need to cross the street, so they have to know when it's safe to do so. However, our traffic lights are not designed to support them. If vocal guidance is provided when the traffic lights change, then visually impaired people would know when it's safe to cross. Another difficulty they face is bus stops. Currently, bus stops provide no voice prompts either, only text. Also, most buses now use LED screens. So when a bus arrives at a bus stop, there is no audible announcement. Considering all of this, how do visually impaired people know when to get on the bus? Could we use computer vision to solve the problems with traffic lights and bus rides? This will work for traffic lights within 10 meters. For example, here in Shenzhen, Roads rarely have 6 or 8 lanes, but in Beijing, you often see lines of cars across many lanes. In such cases, sensors and cameras cannot really help as they can't get clear photos. So vision technology is not realistically an option to solve the remote perception problem. But if we installed audio guidance on traffic lights, this would solve the problems far more easily than vision technology. There is also the issue of bus travel. As far as I'm aware, our bus data is not completely open to the public. It's possible that companies like Tencent and Baidu can access it because their apps would commercially benefit from this information. But when a company is developing products for visually impaired people, especially startups, it can be extremely difficult to get that data. It's not cost-effective for a startup to buy such data, as its user base is going to be very small. I think our government should provide incentives for companies that develop travel solutions for visually impaired people. Another issue is accessible facilities, and we still have a long way to go. Tactile paving has been designed for visually impaired pedestrians, but this does not really solve the issues with travel that they face. I think the best solution would be to offer visually impaired people a pair of smart eyes. These smart eyes could then safely navigate for them with voice guidance. Well, thank you, Mr. Zhou. After hearing from our four guests today, we can see that our tech people do not match the traditional stereotypes. The common perception has always been that they only care about technology and they don't worry about money or policies, but it's not like that. When technicians start working on a product or a business, they need to consider many factors. So I'm sure all of you here will want to call for greater participation to promote information accessibility. We'd also like to see more contributions in terms of talent, industry support, and technology, so that we can drive the information accessibility industry forward together. Now let's wrap up. We have discussed the many difficulties facing information accessibility, but I believe that you must also have high expectations for this industry. Could each of you share your expectations in 1 or 2 sentences? Let's do a quick summary. Who would like to say first? I'll go first, but I honestly wasn't prepared for this. In my team, we do not say the disabled. We say people with disabilities, and our products are for people with disabilities, including visually impaired people. Some visual impairments can be permanent. Elderly people will often have more than one disability, for example, loss of hearing and vision. People in their 70s or 80s can face many difficulties, including issues with their sight, hearing, movement, and cognition. So in my view, everyone needs accessibility technology. The only difference is probably that different people need it at different stages of life. Young people also need accessibility services in certain scenarios, like driving, as I mentioned earlier on. When we have a suitcase, we should take an elevator rather than an escalator. Elevators are designed for those in wheelchairs, as well as those carrying heavy luggage. Everyone needs accessibility services, including those related to phones. I'd like to provide another example. My master's thesis was about accessibility services for older people. Although I made some changes based on my supervisor's suggestion, My intention was to design an app for older people, like a ride-hailing app or a contacts app, or a mobile interface with larger text sizes. When my father first used a smartphone, I enabled the mobile interface for seniors on his phone for a year. When I returned home for the Spring Festival the following year, I disabled this function and made the text larger on this phone. If large companies are developing separate interfaces for seniors, that means huge costs. Suppose they develop a senior version, but there are no upgrades to this version while other functions are upgraded, then older users will be left behind. Older users will find themselves unable to use many new functions, like shopping. As these functions are usually designed and developed for young people, the senior version is usually left without an upgrade. I still remember the content of my master thesis. Mobile phones generally have an accessibility module through which text size can be enlarged. For many of the common apps like contacts, no senior version needs to be developed, as older users can just increase the size of text. For app tools, developers don't need to worry about operations or multiple upgrades. They just need to enable or embed larger text during development. That way, the elderly can enable the larger text mode when they use their phones. So when your parents want to call you, they don't need to worry about finding their reading glasses first. They can just enable the larger text mode. This allows them to call you whenever they want, without needing to find their reading glasses. It's very beneficial to help our parents. In many apps, especially tool apps, have embedded larger text sizes for the elderly. I hope that developers in China will also develop more accessibility components which can benefit not just the visually impaired but also the elderly. We can develop a set of components and make them open source, so that developers can use them to develop tool apps at lower costs. Our team has recently developed many mini programs for which we have created a set of accessibility components. These mini programs can benefit both the visually impaired and the elderly. As long as a given mode is turned on, the devices will become easier for the elderly or visually impaired to use. Accessibility barriers will be removed. So I hope that large companies and programmers can contribute more accessibility components to open source communities like Git and GitHub. This way, many companies can access these components and develop accessibility services at lower costs. I do not support developing separate versions for the elderly or visually impaired, because without future upgrades, these people will still be left behind, as no new functions will be available to them. So my suggestion is to embed an accessibility module or introduce accessibility components to phone apps, which will help cut development costs. You're right, technical staff can develop accessibility solutions in many different ways. We can optimize our own products and use our technical know-how to help others develop products with better accessibility services. We are currently developing accessibility components that can be directly used by apps in the future. Some of our apps rely on open source accessibility components, which has greatly accelerated our development. We will make some of our accessibility components open source. Okay, Mr. Liu, what do you think about the accessibility trends? We talked a lot about this topic and about current policies. The world has reached a deeper and broader consensus on information accessibility. I think information accessibility will develop rapidly in the coming years. So all I want to say here is that an era of information accessibility is fast approaching, and it will fundamentally change the way we live. Okay, Mr. Zhang, what about you? China has one of the largest populations of people with disabilities and of older adults worldwide. China strongly supports sustainable development. So its aging population is growing rapidly. Accessibility, including information accessibility, will become a huge market in China. China's 85 million people with disabilities and over 300 million senior citizens will be a key part of that market. Your products and service recipients will be directly affected by your ability to implement accessibility. If your products target the elderly or people with disabilities, you will need to invest more into developing information accessibility services. Technical personnel now have access to information accessibility courses at many major universities in China. In the future, businesses, academia, and research institutes, including students and technical personnel, will pay more attention to accessibility. How should we position ourselves? I think this is a question every company needs to answer. I hope that the Chinese government introduces new policies, including those related to companies, so that companies working on accessibility can grow rapidly. This will create an enormous market. It will help lay a solid foundation for China's accessibility services and foster strong technical expertise for companies to expand into overseas markets. So, I'm optimistic about the accessibility domain. Okay, thank you, Mr. Zhang. Professor Zhou, what do you think about this? Some technical personnel have misconceptions about accessibility, be they students or engineers at companies. They think that working on accessibility may limit the scope of their service recipients. Actually, technology can go beyond the accessibility domain. And apply to other domains. When we develop products to help the visually impaired with travel, the most important function is road sensing. If we can do well in road sensing, we can effectively develop many apps. I like to use robots as an example. Can we make robots that can walk around outside like ordinary people? Can robots deliver packages right to our doorsteps? If the answer is yes, then we don't need other couriers. When we extend our technologies to other domains, we can actually do many things. What's more, accessibility is a huge untapped market. China has a large population living with disabilities, but has scarce accessibility services. Technology should be a force for good. When using technology to satisfy the needs of ordinary consumers, we should also use technology to improve the lives of people with disabilities. Okay, thank you, Professor Zhou. Professor Zhou's summary has taken our discussion to a higher level. I very much agree that information accessibility will be a huge untapped market, and that information accessibility will give everyone, including those with disabilities, equal opportunities in society. Everyone can contribute to greater information accessibility. In return, information accessibility will help make new breakthroughs in our technologies and products. So, all of society should work to improve information accessibility. I hope that our discussion today has inspired you in some way. That's all for today. Thank you. Thank you to all our panelists for your insights, and thank you to our audience members for your participation. Technological innovation drives social inclusiveness, but it requires cross-industry, cross-discipline, and cross-organization collaboration. Openness and collaboration can greatly accelerate our progress towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We hope more people and organizations can join our efforts in enhancing digital inclusiveness and creating a better and more inclusive world. Let's do it together. Thank you all for being here, and see you next time.